John D. Rockefeller, a shrewd businessman, was rapidly expanding his oil refining empire in the late 19th century. His company, Standard Oil, sought to consolidate the fragmented oil industry. This ambition led to a controversial acquisition that would later define public perception of his business tactics. This is their first-hand account of the Bacchus Oil Company acquisition. The richest man who ever lived is accused of robbing a widow, a defenseless woman, stripped of millions. The story spreads across America. It sticks. It becomes the thing people believe about him above all else. And now, an old man, he picks up his pen to answer it. Every date, every dollar, every signature. This is not a history lesson. This is his private memoir.
Late in 1871, we began to purchase some of the more important refineries of Cleveland. The conditions in the oil trade were so chaotic, so uncertain, that most refiners were very desirous to get out of the business altogether. We invariably offered those who wished to sell the choice of taking cash or stock in our company. We much preferred that they take the stock, but $1 in those days looked as large as a cartwheel. They knew what $1 would buy, but they were skeptical, deeply skeptical, that the oil business could ever be resurrected, and these shares made worth anything at all. In most cases, they were even hasty in their choice of the cash. All these purchases were conducted with the utmost fairness and good faith on our part, and yet, in many quarters, the stories were told in such a form as to suggest these sales were made unwillingly, forced, crushed by superior power. There was one transaction above all others, the purchase of the property of the Bacchus Oil Company. In that story, I am made to appear as a man who personally robbed a defenseless widow of an extremely valuable property, paying her only a mere fraction of its worth. It is a tale that makes the strongest appeal to the sympathy. And if it were true, it would represent a shocking instance of cruelty. Its wide acceptance has awakened more hostility against me than any charge ever made. This is my reason for entering into such detail, a thing I am exceedingly reluctant to do, and for many years have refrained from doing. Mr. F.M. Bacchus was a highly respected citizen of Cleveland, an old and personal friend of mine. After his death in 1874, his business was carried on as the Bacchus Oil Company. In the latter part of 1878, our company purchased certain portions of that company's property. The negotiations extended over several weeks. They were conducted on behalf of Mrs. Bacchus by Mr. Charles Marr, and on behalf of our company by Mr. Peter Jennings. I personally had nothing to do with the negotiations, except for this. When the matter first arose, Mrs. Bacchus requested that I call at her house, and so I did. She spoke of selling the property and asked me to personally conduct the negotiations. This I declined to do. I told her plainly that I was not familiar with the details of the lubricating business. I advised her not to take any hasty action. When she expressed her fears that she could not even get rail cars to transport her oil, I made her an offer. I said that though we needed our cars in our own business, we would loan her any number she required, and do anything else in reason to assist her. I did not see why she could not prosecute her business successfully, just as in the past. But I told her that if, after reflection, she still wished to sell, some of our people familiar with the trade would take it up with her. She still desired that we buy. So, negotiations were taken up by Mr. Jennings, and the only other thing I did was this. When our experts reported what the works and goodwill were worth, I asked them to add $10,000 to make doubly sure that she received full value. The sale was consummated, as we supposed, to her entire satisfaction. The price was paid, and then, a day or two later, I received from her a very unkind letter, complaining she had been unjustly treated. To my profound astonishment, I reviewed every point of the negotiation to satisfy myself whether I had unwittingly done her any wrong. And then I wrote to her on the 13th of November, 1878. I wrote that in all she had written, she did me most grievous wrong. It was of little moment to my interests whether the Bacchus business was purchased or not. I reminded her of a time, 2 years before, when she had consulted Mr. Flagler and myself about selling out to a Mr. Rose at a considerably lower price than she now received, and on time, not in cash. As to the price, it was 3 times greater than the cost at which we could now build equal or better works. I had urged $60,000 myself, which some of our own people thought far too high. And then I made her an offer no robber would make. I offered to restore the entire purchase. She need only return our money and leave us as though no sale had ever occurred. If she did not wish that, I offered her 1, 2, or 300 shares of the stock at the very same price we had paid. I left these offers open to her for 3 days. Neither offer was accepted. So that this might not rest on my word alone, I gathered the documents. The first was a letter from Mr. H.M. Bacchus, the brother of her deceased husband, who had worked in the business. He wrote it without any solicitation from me. He wrote that ever since Mrs. Bacchus sent me that unjust and unreasonable letter, he had wanted to record his disapproval. He had lived in the house. He was there the day I called. He was in favor of the sale from the first. He wrote that Mrs. Bacchus did not know, and no one could convince her, that the best thing that ever happened to her financially was selling to us. That 5 more years of desperate competition would have bankrupted the company. He said she believed I had robbed her of millions, that she fed her children on that diet 3 times a day, more or less, principally more, until it had become a kind of mania. He knew of the $10,000 added at my request. He knew we had paid 3 times the value. And all that ever saved the company from ruin was the sale of it to us. He himself had gone on to Buffalo and met defeat, then to Duluth, riding the top wave, until the real estate bubble broke, and he broke with it. But he had tried to take his medicine and look pleasant, instead of sitting under a juniper tree and blaming his losses on John D. Rockefeller. Then came the sworn affidavits. Mr. Ma, the widow's own representative, swore that the company had first offered to sell its entire stock for $150,000. He swore that Mrs. Bacchus was cognizant of every detail, consulted at every step, that she owned about 7/10 of the company and fully approved. We did not buy everything, only the oil on hand, for which we paid the full market price, near $19,000, and the works and goodwill offered at $71,000, for which we offered $60,000. It was promptly accepted. Ma swore that nothing said during the whole negotiation could be construed as a threat, that nothing hastened or pushed the trade, that Mrs. Backus herself frequently urged him to bring it to a conclusion, anxious to be relieved of the care. And Mr. Maloney, her superintendent from the company's founding, swore the same, that he could have built those very works new for $25,000, that there were no threats, no intimidations, nothing of the kind. The negotiations were pleasant and fair, the price paid in excess of the value, and satisfactory to Mrs. Backus and all concerned for her. So far as I can see, after more than 30 years have elapsed, there was nothing but the most kindly and considerate treatment of Mrs. Backus on the part of our company. I regret only one thing, that she did not take at least part of her pay in our certificates, as we suggested she should do.
The widow kept her cash. The stock she refused would have made her a fortune many times over. And the richest man in history spends his final years not counting his money, but defending a single signature against the verdict of the public. The ledger of facts says one thing. The world believed another. And belief, it turns out, is the one asset he could never quite buy. There are more voices in the archive waiting to be read,